How's it going, guys? As promised, I'm going to be bringing you the Holy Paladin guide. I just want to thank you guys for being subscribed to the channel. Everyone helped take part in getting this guide done. I appreciate you guys very much. If you guys watch the Shaman guide, it's going to be done in the exact same format. I'm showing you the template of the order in which I'm going to talk about things. If you don't really want to know about races, macros, just things like that, you already know, and you kind of want to go back, you want to go further into the video, you can see like what I'm talking about and kind of gauge like, oh, I need to rewind a little bit to see this, or I need to fast forward a little bit to see this. Let's go ahead and get started here. Races for Holy Paladin I think is a lot more flexible than Resto Shaman. If you guys watch the Resto Shaman guide, I'm currently a Blood Elf on my Paladin. I don't necessarily think that is, the end-all, be-all. I actually think that, Tauren's actually a decent option right now. I think War Stomp's okay. You can be a little aggressive with a War Stomp Repentance. You get that extra stamina. I think Tauren's fine if you want to play Tauren. I think Zandalari Troll is actually fine if you want to play Zandalari Troll. I think crit is actually one of the better stats for a Holy Paladin, and you actually can get a crit proc on a Zandalari Troll, so I think that's fine. And honestly, I think the regenerate and bubble is good. I've actually debated going Zandalari Troll recently, just because I like when you use Divine Steed. You're on like a Triceratops. I think it's pretty cool. But here we go. Increased effect from critical strikes. It's pretty decent for Holy Paladin. And then you have the opportunity to change your low or whatever. I'm currently Blood Elf right now. I don't think it's that crazy. I actually think it's worse than what it used to be because you don't actually get mana back from Blood Elf anymore. You get one Holy Power, and I use it for one Holy Power every now and then. But I every once in a while I do have like a decent purge. I purged the bop the other day that won us the game. So something to take note there. There's a lot of flexibility for the Alliance. I would say I would be a little bit less flexible. I think that Human's really good right now. Human's kind of always good. It gives you that PvP trinket, which allows you to play the Relentless, which, basically it gives you reduced CC and the opportunity to trinket something. Only a stun that is, but I think for Alliance, yeah, it's a little bit less flexible. Dwarf is probably an okay option, because kind of a similar effect and get out of a silence at least from the stone form. I wouldn't really recommend playing Draenei, and that's kind of it. So I would, if you're Alliance, I would say you probably want to be Human. There's some situations where Dwarf is actually better than Human, but if you're Horde, you can kind of do whatever you want. As a matter of fact, I might actually go Zandalari on my Paladin. I'm not 100% sure. We'll think about that. So in terms of the races, a little bit more flexibility there. Oh yeah, you could do Dwarf or Dark Iron Dwarf. It's kind of the same thing. On Shaman, I think I recommended regular Dwarf. On Holy Paladin, I would maybe go Dark Iron Dwarf just so you don't get attacked, because I feel like you get attacked a little less often on Holy Paladin than Shaman. You can at least get that Intellect, and Intellect is actually really good in this expansion. So we're going to jump into talents and honor talents. There was a couple changes in this expansion for Paladins. Row number 1, Bestow Faith. It's really good. With the way they added Holy Power back to the game, Bestow Faith giving 1 Holy Power is really powerful. I've struggled a little bit with getting trained on my Paladin. It could have been a gear issue. It could have been a comp issue. It could have been something like that. But there's a possibility that Crusader's Might is good if you're getting trained by like 2 melee, and you're constantly using Crusader Strike to reset the cooldown of your Holy Shock, as well as give you additional Holy Power for more instant cast. Because if you're getting trained by 2 melee, you're not going to be able to cast to keep yourself alive. It's just not possible. They took away your fast Holy Light. The only time you're really going to get healing off is during Divine Favor. Even if you fake a couple kicks and you get a couple flashlights off, it's not going to really do anything. Your flashlights actually heal for nothing. The only thing they're really going to do is help you generate Holy Power. So just a little bit of an option here if you want to try Crusader's Might, if you're getting trained down by Holy, if you feel like you could weave that in. This is actually how you heal in PvE. So there's something there. Saved by the Light is probably one of my favorite and coolest abilities in the game. In my opinion, I like it a lot. When someone drops below 30% health, if they have Beacon of Light, they get a 7,000 shield. That's pretty high in regards to your HP. It's definitely that little safety net that you can have. You can pre-beacon yourself if you feel like you're going to be swapped to. Or you kind of like let your DPS know that there's situations where they have the shield if they get low. Definitely really good to communicate and understand if you actually have that safety net. If you're going to trinket something and then Saved by the Light procs, be like, oh wow, I maybe could have sat that. Saved by the Light's awesome. I would never spec out of it. The level 30 row is really flexible. I think it depends drastically on what comp you play. I think all of these talents are really, really viable. I would say Fist of Justice is probably the most common one. You know, just constantly rotating those Hodges. But if you want to get yourself a second DR, so instead of only having a stun, now you have a stun and a incap or a stun and a blind effect. Repentance is a little bit more difficult to get off. Blinding Light is instant CC. It really depends on the setup that you're playing. I feel like you kind of sometimes need help getting Repentance. But if you don't have a a blind or fear type DR on your team, Blinding Light could be better. I've been playing Warrior, Shadow Priest, Holy Paladin, and believe it or not, even though we already have Shadow Priest Fear and Warrior Fear, I still kind of like Blinding Light for the guaranteed crowd control, so full stun to a full blind. I tried Repentance a little bit, and it actually felt really difficult to kind of keep my teammates alive and positioned properly to get Repentances. Repentance was a little bit easier to get off last expansion, in my opinion, just because you had that one haste cooldown. I don't even know if Wings gave you haste last expansion. I don't think it did, but, Holy Avenger did, so, sometimes you can have a little bit faster Repentances. And also, you don't really play much haste now for Holy Paladin. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I guess you could if you chose to, but personally speaking, just think about it like this. If you're a comp that, constantly needs a lot of stuns or lacks stuns, try Fist of Justice. If you're a comp that feels like you're missing a little bit of CC and you want to try and help get that crowd control, Repentance is really good for, extending crowd control chains, and Blinding Light is really good for kind of getting that, set up crowd control if you're trying to do things yourself. Maybe your team doesn't have much crowd control. For example, if I was playing like a melee cleave, I would probably play Blinding Light because the melee cleave is going to kind of take care of everything, and I'm going to kind of set up the crowd control on my own. Like if I was playing Windwalker Decay, I think Blinding Light would be pretty good. But if we were playing Windwalker Decay and we kind of like wanted to attack healer, I think the additional stun consistently is also a pretty good option. So pretty flexible in this row. Definitely don't just kind of stick to one choice. Try and be a little bit flexible with it and just trial and error, see which one you like. Level 35 talents, I generally play Cavalier. This isn't always the right option. I just kind of like having the extra mobility to get away or to play offensive. Unbreakable Spirit's a decent option. I have only really played this when I feel like I'm getting trained by something where I can't actually move, aka Rogue Mage. Shorter cooldown on Bubble, shorter cooldown on your, shield wall effect that you can use while stunned to possibly keep you alive more frequently in that stun. I think it's, 30% off? So 30% off 1 minute is 18 seconds, I believe. So it ends up, giving you maybe a little bit more of an opportunity to survive in a stunlock. There's also a possibility, I don't play this, good paladins probably do play this in some situations, where if you are playing to absolutely max range your opponents, and this in the past has been pretty good against, Death Knights, so you can max range that Death Grip, you can kind of stay out of the fight, increase the range of your healing to 60 yards, and also increase the effectiveness of your mastery, which is actually just a raw healing throughput increase. Rule Law is actually decent. I personally don't play it. I don't really have a keybind for it right now. If I see other Holy Paladins playing it frequently, or I feel like, this is the way I'm playing the game, I'm playing really far back, I'm not going for crowd control, I'm not really being attacked, I want to avoid CC, I might give it a try. So Rule of Law is actually an okay option in that regard. I think you're actually supposed to use it in PvE, but I generally play Cavalier in this tier. So the level 40 talents have been changed a little bit. Let me actually do this so you can see them better. Holy Avenger used to be 20% haste, 20% healing on Holy Shock, or 30% haste, 30% healing on Holy Shock, whatever it was last expansion. It is now a Holy Power generation is tripled for 20 seconds. The only thing I really don't like about this is the fact it's a 3-minute cooldown. I think if it was a 2-minute cooldown, I could maybe see it, seeing some play. But I feel like Divine Purpose just procs so much more frequently and actually gives you that additional throughput. I kind of feel like Paladins are a very heavy cooldown based class, and they've always been a heavy cooldown based class, and rotating those cooldowns is really effective. But I kind of feel like when you run out of cooldowns, your healing in between those cooldowns generally tends to be a little bit weaker, and I feel like Divine Purpose kind of helps that out. And I don't think Holy Avenger rotates pretty well. Situations I'm seeing this can maybe be played is, there's been one specific composition that trained me on Holy Paladin where I'm really struggling to live, and it's very possible I'm just not doing things right because, full disclosure, I'm not the best Paladin in the game right now. I still have a lot to learn. But there's a possibility that if you're getting trained by Melee Cleave or something like that, and you're really struggling to survive for, however long it is, Holy Avenger might get you to that next set of wings or whatever it might be. Just because I feel like Holy Avenger, if you're sitting really far back, is not really going to be that good, because if you're only using Holy Shock, you're not really getting that much additional Holy Power. You know, Holy Shock's a bit of a long cooldown. You probably don't want to overlap Holy Shock with Wings, because then, you know, you're going to kind of have that dead period where you have no cooldowns. But if you're using Holy Avenger and you're getting value with Crusader Strike, so you Holy Avenger Holy Shock, you know, then you Word of Glory, and then you Crusader Strike, then you Word of Glory, then you Crusader Strike, then you Word of Glory, then you Holy Shock, then you Word of Glory. Like, you're actually going to get pretty good value out of it. So if you're getting trained hard by a melee cleave, it's very possible that Holy Avenger is something that you might want to try to kind of extend that game a little bit, and I could recommend trying it in that regard. The 45 talent, I don't know what this one was last expansion, and I think I'm almost certain that Avenging Crusader was a PvP talent last expansion. Maybe it wasn't. I can't fully remember, but I generally play Sanctified Wrath, but this is a little bit of an interesting tier. So when I first started playing Holy Paladin, I played Sanctified Wrath, and, you know, a lot of people in my chat were like, dude, Awakening's amazing, Awakening's amazing. And I'm like, I don't really know. I kind of really like this short Holy Shock, and I like the increased duration of Wings. And the more I played Paladin, the more I realized that when you pop Wings, you're generally pretty safe, okay? Which means that if you use Wings and you're at full HP and you're not really struggling, why not have Wings more often? You know what I mean? So I play Sanctified Wrath only in situations where I feel like Wings isn't enough. And it doesn't happen very often. But generally speaking, I think Awakening is actually really good for Holy Paladin. But I will say, and this is something that you absolutely should note, if you're playing Awakening and you feel like you don't have enough healing throughput in your Wings to kind of match those initial cooldowns, you might want to try Sanctified Wrath. And I've dealt with this, I think, only one time so far in this expansion, and it's generally speaking when I fight Windwalkers. When I fight Windwalkers, and specifically Windwalker DK, actually, I actually play this versus Ret Paladins too, but maybe I don't need to. Even when I was playing Sanctified Wrath, and I had more healing throughput during that Wings, I still really struggled to heal. I actually played Awakening one game thinking like, okay, you know what? Let's just try and live out their cooldowns, and you know, I'll have like a little bit of extra healing after the cooldowns. We got absolutely blown apart in the opener, and I felt like I didn't have enough healing. So Sanctified Wrath was definitely a better option there. And then generally speaking, during Ret Paladins, I kind of just like to match their Wings with my Wings. That way it lines up on CD, and I feel like I have enough healing throughput during their entire Wings. But Awakening might be better there. I should try it. You know what I mean? If you're ever in a situation where you're winning games, try Awakening. And if you feel like you need that like longer, stronger Avenging Wrath, maybe go back to Sanctified Wrath, at least for that specific matchup. But Awakening is very good. Definitely a talent that you don't want to sleep on. I think I like it a lot in 2v2, specifically in 2v2. 3v3 definitely really good. And then Avenging Crusader is something that I just can't really get behind right now. I kind of feel like positioning is very important for Holy Paladin. I feel like Avenging Crusader kind of takes you out of position a little bit. There is something to note that it's really good versus Shadowy Duel. You know, if a rogue duels your partner and you want to get healing out on him, Avenging Crusader will heal him inside that Shadowy Duel. So in 2v2, when I fight against Rogue Mage, I actually play Avenging Crusader just for that specific scenario. It's possible Avenging Crusader is okay in 3s versus Rogue Mage, but you got to be careful, because if you're trying to like avoid polymorphs and stuff, you want to make sure that you're not, you know, putting yourself out of position. And then one of the things I don't really like about Avenging Crusader is because it does cost a lot of mana. You know, it ends up chewing your mana up a little bit. And then finally, the final talent. This was also changed. So Glimmer Light, obviously new. But I think the go-to right now, it's never going to be Beacon of Virtue in PvP. Just go ahead and cross this talent off right now. I think the option right now is Beacon of Faith. I like Beacon of Faith a lot. I think Beacon of Faith has really good synergy with the way you generate holy power. So if you flash a light someone without a beacon, you don't get holy power. If you holy light someone without a beacon, you don't get holy power. Having the option to, you know, heal 2 different people with the beacons, you know, obviously is going to give you holy power pretty frequently. And it also has very, very good synergy with Saved by the Light, which means, you know, when I play compositions, I feel like my team is always stacked up. Specifically when I'm playing melee cleave, you know, Mez and Troll are always on top of each other. You know, when I play with a Shadow Priest, basically I've only played a couple comps in this expansion so far, but when I play with a Shadow Priest, Sam, Mez is always kind of on top of Sam, which means that they're both getting cleaved, and this double beacon's getting a ton of value. Saved by the Light's proccing on both of them. When I fight against Rogue Mage in the opener, having Saved by the Light on 2 people is actually huge. It makes it so only one person is kind of like the ideal target to open on. I think that Beacon of Faith is really good in that regard. I will say I haven't done it yet, but if you're playing like a comp that's not really taking a ton of spread damage, or maybe you're spread out a lot more, like you're playing a wizard comp or something, Glimmer Light could be better. It's possible it could be better. You know, if you're playing a comp and you notice that you're not really taking a lot of cleave damage, go and try Glimmer Light. It's going to give you a little bit extra healing. It's going to give you that extra buff protection. So yeah, do note that Glimmer Protection is a magic buff. Glimmer Light, excuse me. It is a magic buff, which means maybe your bops can stick on longer, your freedoms can stick on longer, things like that. I haven't really found myself in that circumstance where I feel like I do need Glimmer Light. In 2v2, it's possible Glimmer could be better. I still like Beacon of Light, or Beacon of Faith. In 2v2, Glimmer could be better. I should probably experiment with it a little bit. But yeah, I think Beacon of Faith is generally going to be kind of the powerhouse for that one. There's actually a few pretty decent honor talents. Nothing really changed. Ultimate Sacrifice is very good in this meta. I like using it as often as I can. Sometimes it feels like you can't. You know, if you're fighting against, like, for example, you know, those cleave comps, you want the double bop, the double freedom, and the Light's Grace is obviously really powerful. Divine Favor, you will never take off Divine Favor, ever. And then if you fight against like a Shadow Priest, I'm a big fan of using Divine Vision. If I fight against an Ellie Shaman, I'm a huge fan of Cleanse the Weak. So Cleanse the Weak actually got an incredibly big buff in this expansion. It's really funny. So basically in previous expansions, Cleanse the Weak kind of sucked because you had to be within the same range, or everyone had to be within inside the aura, okay? Aura's last expansion and the previous expansion were only 10 yards. But now that Blizzard actually brought auras back, they're actually a 40-yard range, which means that this talent never got changed, and everyone is always in range of your aura, which means that if you fight against an Ellie Shaman, you're cleansing Flame Shocks off the whole fucking squad. If you fight against, like, Shadow Priest, and you decide to use Divine Vision and Cleanse the Weak, you're dispelling VTs off the whole squad, and they're doing reduced damage. But you do drop out the Light's Grace. I'm actually okay with swapping Light's Grace in this expansion, because I feel like you don't really Holy Light that often, and when you do, it's with Divine Favor, and when you Divine Favor, generally speaking, you're already going to top someone. So, for example, like, versus Rogue Mage, I actually play Ultimate Sac, and I play Blessed Hands. Because I feel like when I Divine Favor, I top anyway, and I feel like having that second bop and the Ultimate Sac versus Rogue Mage is really, really good. If you fight against UA Warlocks or Shadow Priests, you want to use Divine Vision. If you fight against, like, those melee cleaves, Blessed Hands. If you fight against Ellie Shamans, you definitely want to Cleanse the Weak because Flame Shock destroys their damage. You can use Cleanse the Weak versus Boomkins if you want, but I actually really like Ultimate Sac versus Boomkins. But if I were to fight against, like, Boomkin Ellie or something, for example, I would actually drop Light's Grace and use Cleanse the Weak. Because when Boomkin uses Incarn, I literally just press Sac. If my teammate's at 100% HP versus a Boomkin and I see a Star Surge flying in with Incarn, I press Sac. Because I've been killed too many times in this expansion to Star Surges flying. It's literally karma for 2018 BlizzCon of Sam I Am just one-shotting everyone, but I don't mess around with that. And that's how I feel about that. So yeah, Honor Talents didn't really change too much, but there's some pretty good options. I'm pretty happy about it. Hollow Ground actually might be better than double bop, double freedom, depending on the comp that you're playing, and if you're getting trained, because you can actually constantly remove slows off yourself. It's actually kind of better than double freedom. So we're gonna go ahead and move into macros now. I'm gonna kind of try and go through these quickly because macros for me don't really change very often. I don't have any crazy macros. It's normally just arena 1-2-3s, party 1-2-3s, and focus macros. So as you guys can see, Focus Hammer of Justice, Party 1 Blessing of Freedom, Party 2 Blessing of Freedom. This is just a cleanse for myself, cleanse for Party 1, cleanse for Party 2, Holy Shock Self, Bop Self, Freedom Self. This is just literally a macro that looks like Shield Wall, that's Divine Protection. I have Bestow Self. So far, these macros aren't really crazy. I'm going to say that I would definitely have, you know, Focus Hodge. I like Freedom 1-2-3. I like Dispel 1-2-3. The things I do for target self are not something that I'm going to say you have to use. Like, I just like Holy Shock Self for this reason. Ready? Instead of, you know, doing this, Holy Shock myself, I just do this. It makes my life easy. The main reason I made this macro is because I played Priest back in the day and I had Powered Shield Self, so when I play Druid, when I play Paladin, when I play Shaman, I have Riptide Self, I have Rejuve Self, and I have Holy Shock Self. It just made sense. So Bop Self, Bestow Self, and then the same thing if you guys didn't see the Shaman guide, all my Paladin attacking abilities are actually on target of target. I think it's pretty helpful, especially when, you know, now that Hammer of Wrath gives you that extra holy power during wings. Just so if I press Judgment while I'm healing Mez or whoever I'm healing, it just judges their target. It makes it really simple to do damage. You don't have to do a bunch of target swapping. Same thing with Hammer of Wrath. I would recommend using this. I would recommend using the Judgment. It's just really easy to use in my opinion. It's really easy to use in my opinion. I actually have a cast sequence for my auras here. And the reason why is because in PvP, you're only going to switch between Devotion and Concentration. So at the start of every game, you know, I put on Devotion. And if I want to swap on, you know, Concentration in the middle of the game, it's the same bind. If I want to swap back Devotion, it's the same bind. If I want to swap back Concentration, it's the same bind. So I kind of like this simple cast sequence macro. Maybe you guys will think it's kind of noob. You know, if I'm mounted out in open world, I'll click Crusader Aura. It doesn't really bother me, and then, you know, we'll go back to Devotion Aura. Now, there is a possibility that in Arena you do want to use Crusader Aura for your Divine Steed. If you want that on all separate binds, that's on you. Maybe good Paladins do that to try and get, you know, CC. You know, you Crusader Aura up, and then you Divine Steed, and you do run a little bit faster, try and get for that CC, and then maybe after you switch on Devotion Aura. If that's the case, the Cast Weakens macro would be really bad. I'm kind of just out of binds. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, go ahead and look at my action bars right here. These are my action bars. These are my keybinds. I'm struggling a little bit here. That's why I have the cast sequence. I used to have a cast sequence macro for switching between Inner Fire and Inner Will, if you guys remember what those spells were. So it's very similar to that. I bot Party 1, bot Party 2. I have Taunt Pets with Hand of Reckoning. This is kind of nice to try and taunt pets to break CC. Focus Repentance. The reason why I have like Sack 1-2 and Bop 1-2 and Freedom 1-2 is just because it's really simple. If you're healing this guy and you just want to go ahead and Freedom your other dude, you press it. You know, if you're targeting yourself and your homie gets Karma or something, you just press the Bop Party 1, so target, bopping. Like, it's just faster that way, in my opinion. I like it. I like it. This is just on-use Trinket with Wings. This is an old macro right now. Holy Light with Divine Shield. Player Beacon of Light. Cast Aura Mastery. A lot of people think that this is my Aura Mastery bind right here, but this is actually my Aura Mastery bind. The reason I did that is because back in the day, there was a AoE-wide damage reduction called Divine Sacrifice. That's kind of the way I saw this ability, was my whole team takes less damage. I'm going to make it look like the ability that I'm used to. And my actual Aura Mastery, which I'm used to making me immune interrupts, that's what Divine Favor is going to be. That's kind of why I did that. So cast Divine Favor. Stop casting Blessing and Sacrifice is actually a pretty decent one. I would recommend that. It's kind of like the same thing as like stop cast grounding. Like if you're in the middle of something and you need to use that sacrifice to get CC, it won't actually go off till you're done your cast. So the stop cast is actually pretty useful in that regard. Now I have Sack Party 1-2 as well. Like I said, macros were pretty basic. I'm going to go into stat priority. And I've said this once during the video. Everything that I'm telling you as Paladin is from what I understand. You know, what I've heard from other people, what I've seen other people doing. But in terms of the stat priority, I think that people are going versus crit. I think crit is probably your best throughput, as well as versatility, especially with this 2-piece trinket. And it seems really weird to not be going a lot of haste, especially since haste does affect the cooldown of Holy Shock, and it does increase your cast speed. But the fact of the matter is that haste feels not super valuable right now, because I swear, when I do Arena on my Paladin, I barely cast. And it's going to sound crazy, but I barely cast. And when I do cast, it's generally with Divine Favor, which is 60% cast increase speed. So just looking at a couple of logs here, this was a... Wow, what? This was a 11-minute game where I casted 10 Holy Lights. That's one cast a minute. And keep in mind that that is probably 150% with Divine Favor every single time. It literally just Holy Shock, Word of Glory, Shock Barrier. Now we'll look at a different log because, you know, obviously that's not, you know, super relevant, but I casted twice in this 1-minute game. This is a 3-minute game. I casted 8 times in this game, actually, so we're probably fighting some insane cleave. Red Hunter. Okay, so I was probably just in the backlines casting quite a bit there. So haste could have been maybe valuable in that game. In a 3-minute game, I could still get 6 Divine Favors off with a 25-second cooldown, which means a lot of these Holy Lights were probably still Divine Favored, which means I maybe casted only 2 regular heals. This is a 6-minute game versus what it looks like to be against casters. I probably cast barely. 3 Holy Lights, 6-minute game. So as you guys can see, you don't really cast that much on Paladin. The instant healing is really strong just with Holy Shock, Word of Glory. And then I'm actually a big fan of Shock Barrier. We'll talk about that in a little bit. As a legendary, doing 17% of your healing, not too shabby, right? So I think the stats you want to go for are verse crit. I'm not a huge fan of mastery. Maybe other holy paladins will tell you different. I feel like mastery on holy pal is so awkward. It increases your healing based on distance. Like, ugh, it just feels so weird. Yeah, I don't know. Just the further away they are, it feels like the less benefit you get, and you're not really on top of them. We're gonna go ahead and jump into covenants now. This is a little bit of a strange one, okay? So, covenants, there's three options that I've seen. There's Night Fae, there's Venthyr, and there's Kyrian. I'm gonna start with Night Fae because it's the one that I kind of recommended in my old guide, and I'm gonna talk about kind of why I don't think Night Fae is actually the play right now. Number one, I kind of feel like the actual Soulbinds for Night Fae are not that good. So whenever I go to a Soulbind tree, I kind of am able to immediately pinpoint which one's the best one and for what reason. And I'm looking through all these Soulbinds and I'm like super unimpressed. So Pod Tender is really annoying. I kind of feel like specifically for a Holy Paladin or as a healer in general, having Pod Tender, it kind of seems less value because I feel like when Pod Tender is annoying, it's because the people heal it or pop cooldowns on it. If you're the healer, that's not going to really help you. I don't really think that this is that good. Increasing your maximum health by a little bit, increasing mastery. We don't really like mastery. And I guess I should note that like the end spells are also like kind of awkward. They don't really seem that great. So I guess you go for the third Soulbind, which gives you a little bit extra healing when someone's below 35% health. Or it gives you a little bit extra damage when someone's above 75% health, which, you're a paladin, you do damage and healing, it's probably okay. But even then, like, it just kind of feels like the whole tree is awkward. I think Soul Shape is okay. It's actually kind of nice. I'm not going to lie. Soul Shape actually can get you some distance. It could actually maybe help you get in for some crowd control. The only thing that I have an issue with Paladin right now is that the blessings are a little too slow for the meta. You can see a 45-second cooldown. You want to cycle through 4 blessings. If the meta gets slower, it's very possible that blessings becomes good. But right now, I feel like on average, games don't last long enough for you to cycle through all those blessings, which means it's probably not going to have as much value as other people. But if I were to play this, right here, you always got to go for the potency. You always got to go for the potency. And I'm going to talk about what I think are the best conduits right now. I think for Holy Paladin, you want increased critical strike of Holy Shock, which is obviously very good. And then endurance is shielding words. And then once again, you got to go for the potency. So you're kind of forcing this, which seems pretty terrible. Because potency is obviously really good. Blessing of Summers lasts 25% longer. I'm assuming that's probably going to be the one that you're going to take. Because for Kyrian, I take the Kyrian specific one. So there's a couple things here for the Finesse Conduit. I would say that pure concentration is insane. If you're fighting against Warlocks, for example. Item level 330. Okay, that's obviously not... That doesn't exist right now. But let's just say you get the Mythic one. 32% reduction on fear. 32% reduction on fear if you have concentration R up. That's insane. Imagine stacking that with Relentless or stacking that with Cephus. Like, your team is literally going to praise you. They are going to sing your name. Because no one likes being feared. Everyone hates fear. This will obviously probably get better when Warlocks are a little bit more in the meta. I don't know. I don't really think that the other Finesse Conduits are that crazy. So... If you're not fighting a lot of Warlocks, you can maybe switch to something like Echoing Blessings, which gives you a little bit more value out of that. Or I was actually using Divine Steed Duration. I kind of like being mounted up for longer. It feels pretty good. Helps you get in for that CC. Helps you maybe get away from melee. But yeah, and then Blessing of Summer we always talked about. I think it's a little bit too slow. Pretty cool ability though. I like it a lot. So basically what I'm saying here is I've fought and lost against a Night Fae Paladin the other day. If you play Night Fae, I'm gonna say it's viable. But personally not my favorite. I'll talk about Venthyr here because this is something that I personally underrated. Number one, you're going to go with this first tree here and all the same stuff. It's pretty simple. Pretty simple. Yeah, the other ones really don't seem that good, so you probably just take this one. And then just looking at the tree, Thrill Seeker has a chance to give you haste, not your best stat, but when it's free, it doesn't really matter. Then also you get reduced duration of interrupt effects, which I think stacks with concentration R, which is actually kind of insane. Door Shadows on a Paladin, kind of getting in for that crowd control with a separate DR is pretty nice. I think you can actually do that into a full Repentance if you wanted to try and play aggressive. Not too shabby at all. And then, that's the Door Shadows I'm talking about there. But the Ashen Hollow, okay? The Ashen Hollow is one of the scariest cooldowns in the game. I'm not even kidding. And it's from a healer. It's from a healer. So I think that I fought a Paladin somewhere along the lines on a Tolvaron. I'm trying to see if I can find it. Look at this. This is a Holy Paladin throwing a 10,000 Hammer of Wrath. That's a Holy Paladin. That's Ashen Hollow. Um, so Venthyr is pretty freaking good. When you play Venthyr, I would say that you're most likely going to, play it offensively. It's probably always going to be better in 2v2. So if you're choosing between Venthyr and Kyrian, I would say Holy Paladin Venthyr is offensive, and Holy Paladin Kyrian is defensive. If I was playing Windwalker DK, I would maybe want to be Venthyr. No joke. I think that this damage that you could put out with Ashen Hollow would push people over the edge. I really like Kyrian. But in a tournament realm perspective, I would definitely mess around with Venthyr and give it a try. I will note that, so just looking over Ashen Hollow, just so you guys understand, while you're inside of the Ashen Hollow, you can use Hammer Wrath. You probably want to use Wings anyway, because it increases your damage. And then the damage of Hammer Wrath is increased by 100%. And then on top of that, you're probably going to use the Mad Paragon Legendary, which increases your Hammer Wrath damage by another 30%. You have 30% damage from Avenging Wrath. You have 30% damage from your Legendary. You have 100% damage from your Ashen Hollow. Like, you are legitimately going to hit people for 10,000. Like, this is not a joke. You know what I mean? Hitting someone for a third of their HP, 10k, that can easily close out games. If you're playing some crazy cleave combination, which Windwalker DK is, this could actually be the play. Now, I will say that Kyrian is my personal favorite for Paladin. I kind of like consistency. I think I'm more of a defensive mindset player. I kind of like having that additional, what I consider to be cooldown, because Divine Toll is amazing. I think Divine Toll is absolutely amazing. I think Divine Toll with the Shock Barrier Legendary is personally, pretty sweet. You just get Shock Barrier up on your whole team. You do healing to your whole team. You heal those beacon targets, additional times. I think it's a lot of healing. I'm a big fan of Kyrian. You can use it while you're locked out. One of Paladin's weaknesses is getting interrupted. It gives you an additional fairly big heal while interrupted. So I like this a lot for Holy Paladin. When reduced below 35% health, your file automatically consumes. So that, in combination with Saved by the Light, is going to make you really tanky and durable in those stuns, especially when you have Soul Steel Clamps, which means if you stand still for 5 seconds, stuns are reduced on you by 30%. So even if you don't have Soul Steel Clamps and you get swapped to, you'll have it for the second stun. If you get full stunned, there's a very high chance that the second stun is going to be further diminished. And then with that further diminished stun, with your, Forge Light filter and your Saved by the Light, it's super unlikely that you die in that stun. And believe it or not, I feel like Paladins are actually kind of susceptible to getting hard swapped to. So I feel like this gives Paladins a lot of survivability and sustainability. I think Divine Toll is amazing, and if you PvE, I think it's actually necessary. You know what I mean? I think it's kind of crazy, but I'm a huge fan of Kyrian. Divine Toll feels so good to press every single time you press it. Look at that. Boom, 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 boom. Everyone gets holy shocks. Everyone gets shields. It just feels really good. It feels really good. So my personal preference is Kyrian. Now, from a tournament realm perspective, I may try Venthyr with Cleaves. I might try it, because I've seen what Venthyr can do, and it's very scary. So it's kind of a toss-up. If you want to be the aggressive person that does a ton of damage, if you want to be the defensive person that feels like, you kind of want more defense, it's like a battle of good and evil, man. It's a tough choice in my opinion. Other Paladins might tell you different. That's my personal opinion. Feel free to ask other people. I won't be offended. But that's the information that I've gathered. So that's Covenants, Soulbinds, and Conduits. I didn't really say it, but the second potency conduit that you want to use as Kyrian is the Ringing Clarity, and that's actually going to make your Divine Toll even more powerful. When this procs, it's really strong. I like it a lot. But I used the Holy Light for my first one. And then, like I said, you don't have to use this Finesse Conduit. It's kind of up to you. And the Endurance Conduit is obviously always going to be shielding words. It's also a magic buff, which is really nice. Moving on to Legendaries, I kind of briefly talked about some of the Legendaries that actually pair with your Covenant, which is pretty interesting, having a Legendary that almost feels like it fits for your Covenant. But I think Shock Barrier is probably the best throughput Legendary. Just looking at some logs here, I would say it probably averages about 10% healing, so that's a 9.4. This is a 10-minute game where it did 14% of my healing. This is a 1-minute game where it did only 9.2%. That's still not bad. A 1-minute game where it did 10.3%. 3%. So I would say it's about an average of 10%. Let's check the 3-minute game. 11.3%. I also feel like Paladins in the past basically have no healing while crowd control. This gives you a little extra something. I'm a big fan of Shock Barrier. Like I said, it's that defensive mentality. I think Mad Paragon is definitely really good if you play Vent there. But it's probably okay to have Shock Barrier if you play Vent there too, you know, especially if you just want to do a little bit of damage. The 30% extra damage may not be the difference maker. In 2s, Mad Paragon probably better, but, you know, you can definitely have Shock Barrier as Vent there. It's not, you know, the end of the world. There's definitely some other options of legendaries that you can have. I was informed about Uther's Devotion. Kind of, you know, makes it feel like you have cooldowns pretty frequently. Blessing of Freedom, Blessing of Sack, and Blessing of Protection resets basically 3 seconds per every Word of Glory. Ends up, you know, maybe feeling like quite a bit. Just for example here, let's just, this 3-minute game. How many Word of Glories did we do in this 3-minute game? We did 12. So that would reduce the cooldown of all those abilities by 36 seconds. That actually, you could maybe sneak out an extra sacrifice in that 3-minute game, something like that. I personally haven't played it, but I've heard good things about it. Now, like I said, I'm not a big fan of Mastery on Paladin, and I don't really feel like this seems that good, but basically the benefit you're getting here is Word of Glory receives a 50% increased benefit from your Mastery. I just kind of feel like that's not going to be more healing than Shock Barrier. I could be wrong. Maybe if you stack Mastery, it's really good. But if I understand this correctly, it gains a 50% increased benefit from your Mastery. So if you have 25% Mastery and you are, you know, 20 yards away from someone, you're going to get half the Mastery benefit, which means you're going to get a, you're going to get a 7% healing increase on that person being 20 yards away instead of 40, because at 40 you get no healing increase. So halfway is 7%. Now you get an extra 50% of that 7%, which will give you another 3.5%. So is that how that works? A 3.5% healing increase in that specific scenario? It kind of feels shitty. I don't know. I know some people that play this and have said good things about it. Maybe you're supposed to stack Mastery with this. If you're stacking Mastery and you're the target that's getting trained, this could be insane. Let's say I have 20% Mastery and I'm getting trained. Well, now my Word of Glory on myself is 10% stronger all the time, because Mastery is always full effect on yourself because you're obviously on top of yourself. But even at 20% Mastery, getting 50% increase from that 20%, I feel like Shock Barrier does 10% of your healing. You could do it on multiple people. I don't know. I don't think this legendary is that good personally, but I've heard good things about it, so I'm just trying to share the info. And then obviously Cepheus is always a decent option. The main thing I like from Cepheus is crowd control reduction. It's possible that this is just literally always going to be Biss versus Rogue Mage. It's very possible. Crowd control versus like those heavy CC teams are, you know, kind of how you lose. And if you could reduce that a little bit. So let's go ahead and move into what I have listed here is healing effectively in rotation. Generally speaking, you always want to try and Holy Light or Flashlight someone with a beacon. That's going to be the most effective way to generate holy power. There's sometimes where you don't do that. Sometimes I will use a Divine Favor on myself. Like, for example, if one person's low, or if 2 people are low and they have my beacon and I'm also low, I'll actually Divine Favor myself, top myself, heal the 2 people with beacon. That's 100% fine. Obviously, it kind of goes without saying, try not to ever cap on holy power. I don't do this often, but I try and actually use my Kyrian racial when I have 0 holy power. That way I get full holy power from it, because if you use it at 2 holy power, you're kind of wasting 2 holy power. So if you're at 1 holy power and you use Divine Toll, don't feel too bad. If you're at 2 holy power, really try your best to maybe sneak out a Crusader Strike Word of Glory or sneak out a Holy Shock Word of Glory. So when you get that Word of Glory, you can actually Divine Toll and get the 5 holy power back. Didn't hit every target here. In 2v2, this is kind of irrelevant, but in 3v3, it's more relevant. But yeah, you want to try not to waste holy power on Divine Toll by having too much and overcapping, because essentially it will give you 5. And then, just so you guys understand, Holy Light is always better than Flashlight in every single situation. The only time you ever want to flash a light is if you can't cast the long cast. So it's, you know, this is Holy Light, obviously really slow. There's going to be situations where you can't do this in PvP. Just understand that if you're doing this, it's got to be one of the worst feelings in the world. Like, it's inefficient on mana. It does no healing. That's desperate, okay? That's desperate. I almost think that it's more efficient to try and find targets to Crusader Strike to use Word of Glory. Crusader Strike is 900 mana. It's going to give you 1 holy power. Flash of Light is 2,200 mana, heals for 3k, and it will also give you 1 Holy Power. Flash of Light, it's not the end of the world if you have an Infusion proc. I guess you don't have to feel too bad if you have an Infusion proc because it reduces the mana cost to what a Holy Light would cost. So if you do it with an Infusion proc, it's not the end of the world, but doing it without Infusion proc is a pretty feels bad, man. You want to try and avoid that if possible. Oh, one thing that I want to say in terms of efficiency is that when you use Wings, I don't do it all the time. I struggle with it. Make sure you use Hammer Wrath on cooldown. I didn't actually realize this, but Hammer Wrath is actually literally 0 mana. So when you pop Wings, you want to Hammer Wrath as many times as possible to make sure you're getting free Holy Power, which is free healing, which is going to contribute to, you know, efficiency in the long run. You're getting more healing because you have more Holy Power. You're getting, you know, a longer mana battery because you don't have to spend more mana to generate Holy Power. Definitely use Hammer Wrath on CD with Wings up as often as possible, especially with Awakening. When you proc Awakening, you get extra Hammer Wraths. It's more efficiency. It's going to feel really good. Holy Paladin is pretty simple in my opinion. Like, obviously, you're Holy Shocking on cooldown. You're using Bestow of Faith on cooldown. I would say make sure that if multiple people are taking damage, you want to make sure you kind of rotate Holy Shocks to, you know, keep up shock barrier. If you're playing that legendary, that's one thing that I will say. So for example, if you're playing, you know, 2 people Beacon, Holy Shock 1, Holy Shock the other one, Holy Shock 1, Holy Shock the other one. You should actually have enough time to keep up just about 3 shock barriers at a time. You definitely want to spread out your Holy Shocks for sure. I mean, I could talk about beacons a little bit. I would say for the most part, just keep beacons on the targets that are taking the main amount of damage or the most damage. And then you can be a little bit more flexible with beacon if you're not taking a ton of damage and you feel like you might be swapped to. For example, let's just say I'm playing Windwalker DK and my DK is getting pummeled. My Windwalker's not taking damage. I might throw a beacon on myself because I feel like I might be swapped to. If you're fighting against like a Rogue Mage or like a Ret Hunter or something and you don't have Trinket as a Holy Paladin, they might want to swap to you, so you might want to throw that beacon up on yourself. So if they do swap to you, you get the Save by the Light. So just keep in mind that if you don't have Trinket, you could be a very viable swap target. If someone is below 30% or getting close to below 30% and they don't have beacon, definitely make sure you swap that. It's actually really, really important. And then in terms of Light of the Martyr, I'll actually show you my healing breakdown. Light of the Martyr is actually really powerful in my opinion. Because you don't cast very often on Holy Paladin, what I like to do is... you know, if my targets are taking damage here, and I am kind of, you know, running out of healing, look at the healing difference here, man. This is crazy. This heals for 3,600 instant cast, 700 mana. This actually blows my mind. I didn't even look at this, okay? 3,600 instant cast, 700 mana, all right? 700 mana instant. This is 2,200. This is 3 times the mana cost, and it heals for less. And it's a cast time. Doesn't give Holy Power? You're right. But either way. So, if your teammate's dying, instead of casting Flashlights, what you probably want to do is you probably want to Martyr. And what I like to do with Martyr is I like to Martyr, and then I like to Holy Shock myself. So, I martyr myself down, and then I Holy Shock myself to get myself back up. And then that Holy Shock also heals your beacon target. And then I also like to bestow myself sometimes. So I can keep, you know, like for example, especially if I want to get shock barrier up on this guy, then bestow will kind of top me off here. But Martyr is really powerful. Like, you use Martyr a lot. I'll look at my healing breakdown in some of these games. Light of the Martyr, I did 4 casts here. That was a 3-minute game. Light of the Martyr, 2 casts here. 1-minute game. Light of the Martyr is good, basically, long story short. And I would say you probably want to use it over situations where you're flashlighting unless you desperately feel like you need to heal multiple people at once. AKA Light of the Martyr doesn't help your beacon target. So you want to heal the person with a beacon and the other person with a beacon. And if you need Holy Power. So it is going to be more throughput. But yeah, I think that kind of sums it up. So now we're going to talk about Paladin utility a little bit. Paladins have a pretty strong CC toolkit. We kind of talked about their toolkit, you know, a little bit earlier when we were talking about the talents. But Hammer of Justice, Blinding Light, and Repentance. And you should always be trying to get this kind of stuff off, for the most part. I guess I should say, we'll talk about this a little bit later, you know, with the offense-defense thing. But your utility is basically going to come from your blessings and your crowd control. So Freedom, obviously really powerful. I will say that you need to be a little bit careful about freedoming against mages, because if your team is attacking a mage, and you use freedom, and they spell steal it, now they're not going to be attacking a mage. So I would say, like, higher level gameplay, if your teammates are in, Novas and you freedom them, they should technically have a cancel or a macro. So they get out of the route, and then they can immediately get back on them. Hammer of Justice and Blinding Light, generally things you want to kind of, like, set up with your team. I just want to say right now, by the way, Fist of Justice has really good synergy with Divine Purpose, because when you get these procs, it actually reduces the cost, or reduces the cooldown of your Fist of Justice by 6 seconds. But you want to try and set this CC up for your teammate's burst, or use it to follow up off your teammate's CC. So, for example, if you're playing Rogue Mage Paladin, just throwing it out there, pretty common comp these days. After the sap in the opener, if the mage can't get a sheep, use Blinding Light. And then if you can't get a sheep off that, use Fist of Justice. Like, you're just trying to extend CC chains or start CC chains, coordinated with your team. It's obviously really powerful. Blessing of Protection actually is one of the stronger defensive cooldowns of the game, and one of the stronger offensive cooldowns in the game. So as a Paladin, you can actually use this not only defensively, which is probably going to be the general use of it, but understand that this actually has a really, really strong use offensively, and a lot of people may not realize this, especially at lower ratings, but some of the more, like, top-end common plays with Blessing Protection is if you're trying to kill a Windwalker Monk, you bop when he uses Karma, and it immediately removes Karma. This is actually probably pretty well known, but if a Monk Karma's thinking he's safe and you bop it off, the person that has the debuff, they can immediately die. That's a really strong way to use it if you're playing offensive. And your teammates gets disarmed, they get stunned by something like Stormbolt, if they get intimidating shouted, if they get scattered, things like that. Blessing of Protection removes all of that, and it's actually going to allow them to play more aggressive. This is a very all-in type strategy, but it's something that as a Paladin, like, sometimes you can overwhelm people, especially if you're playing that Venthyr, to try and get that extra damage in. That's pretty common, versus rogues or whatever. You can bop off their cheap shots and kidney shots. Keep in mind, you actually can bop off your own cheap shots and kidney shots, which is going to make you a little bit more durable versus rogues. One thing to note is, if you guys did not know this, you can actually use Blessing of Protection on anyone while you're in a Intimidating Shout or a Asphyxiate. I think it's a bug, but so, for example, if you're playing with a mage and you get Intimidating Shouted, you can bop your mage while you're in that Intimidating Shout. It's kind of bullshit, but that's how the game works. If you were in a kidney shot, you can only bop yourself. You can't bop someone else. So it seems like a little bit of a bug, but yeah, you definitely want to try and use Blessing Protection. Sometimes offensively, you definitely want to look for the points with it. When I play with a mage, sometimes my mage will actually say, "Can you bop me?" Because their healer's in a stun, their DPS is in a stun, and if this Blessing of Protection goes off, nothing is going to stop them from getting the crowd control and doing the damage. It's really good. So something you can maybe coordinate with them. I talked about a little bit earlier, but obviously you can use Avenging Wrath for damage. It allows you to use Hammer Wrath immediately, which is obviously really nice. It gives you access to that Hammer Wrath. If you're the Venthyr, it obviously gives you access to increased strength Hammer Wrath. So, another defensive, offensive ability there from Wings. Pretty powerful. And then obviously if you're playing Sanctified Wrath, you can Holy Shock more frequently for damage. Turn Evil. This is actually a little bit of an interesting one in terms of utility. You can actually fear Warlock pets. You're not really seeing too many Warlocks these days, and you're not really seeing too many Unholy DKs these days, but you can turn evil Abominations, which is actually a really big Unholy DK cooldown, and you can turn evil Warlock Demons, which is actually going to prevent counter spells. So I keep kind of going back to this if you play with a mage. Yeah, if you play with a mage and they want to go for crowd control, turn evil the pet. You cast a turn evil on the pet, it's in crowd control, they can't get CS. A lot of locks don't even play with a pet anymore. I understand that. I think the only one that actually really does is a Destro Warlock, but either way. If you could do this on Shadow Fiend, you should definitely do this on Shadow Fiend. I guess you could banish a Shadow Fiend so it makes sense. Yeah, you should definitely use this on Shadow Fiend, because Shadow Fiend gives mana back. And then also, yeah, if a Death Knight uses Lichborn actually makes them undead. Undeads can't be polymorphed. You can actually turn evil them. So it's pretty interesting. So, yeah, turn evil, actually, a little bit of a niche ability, but definitely some uses there in which you can use it. The blessings are really powerful. The bop, the freedom, the crowd control you have is really powerful. Okay, there's one more thing we could talk about here in terms of utility. And this is something that Paladins got back in this expansion, was Concentration Aura paired with Aura Mastery. So for 8 seconds, your entire team is immune to silence and interrupt effects. This is really, really powerful, especially in my opinion more so for your teammates, because Holy Paladins don't really cast that much. But if you're playing with a mage, they are immune to silence and interrupt effects. They can go for that crowd control. If you're playing with, this is actually pretty common, like ferals or boomkins, and they use convoke spirits. Convoke spirits can no longer be interrupted, which is actually going to get you some of those crazy gibs. If you play with a boomkin or if you play with a feral, I was literally playing with Soda Pop and using Arm Mastery so he could just convoke people without getting kicked. It's kind of a cheesy strat, but it works. But yeah, so if you're playing with one of those caster comps, definitely want to try and synchronize concentration aura up for when they're bursting, and it's going to actually help them get that damage out, which is, in my opinion, pretty cool. I will say that generally speaking, I actually prefer personally to use Devotion Aura, and I think the reason behind that for me is because, number one, I feel like I don't cast it often, so I feel like I get very low value out of Concentration Aura. Number two, I think that damage reduction in this meta is one of the best things you can have. 3% damage reduction is actually no joke. And then also, I personally prefer to use Aura Mastery as a 15% AoE damage reduction as opposed to being immune to interrupts, because I feel like, once again, damage reduction to me is personally more valuable than interrupt reduction. There is sometimes where I will swap. I like Concentration Aura a lot versus Shadow Priest, because Shadow Priests actually have a silence effect, which means you're always getting value out of this Concentration Aura, which is pretty valuable. So I kind of like Concentration Aura over Shadow Priest, especially if you're playing the Fear Conduit, which is right here, Pure Concentration. And then you would also be using that versus Warlocks as well, if you have it. And then outside of Shadow Priest, for the most part, I really do like Devotion Aura for myself. If you're playing with casters, definitely, Concentration Aura could be the way for you, but even when I play Shadow Priest Warrior, Sam's a bitch, man. Fake some interrupts and deal with it. We're using Devotion Aura. At least until you get over 180 item level, you scrub. At Sam I am. I didn't talk about cooldown management, and I'm going to have to talk about it right now. And this is something that I still struggle with my Paladin. So I'm going to do the best I can to try and guide you guys here on how to, I don't want to say properly rotate your cooldowns, but how to, understand how they work, I guess. So I'm going to be talking about Kyrian specifically, because I feel like Kyrian is almost a strong enough cooldown to actually prevent using wings sometimes. But basically, Paladins are all about cooldowns. And the top Paladins not only rotate their cooldowns well, but they rotate their partner's cooldowns well. And this is also going to kind of, dip into communication a little bit as well. But a well-rounded Paladin almost feels like a brick wall. It feels like every time you attack them, their partner instantly uses a CD, or they instantly respond with a CD, and it almost feels like it could rotate indefinitely. So the cooldowns that you have are, you have the Bop, you have the Sack, you have the Devotion Aura if you want it, you have your Wings, you have your Kyrian, you have your Trinket. Like, it feels like there's so many answers. How do we best explain this? This is crazy. So in the current meta that we're in, when I see very large cooldowns, I like to respond on Paladin. So for example, if I see a Windwalker use Weapons of Order and Tiger and, images, I literally just want to press Sack. No joke. Versus Red Paladins and versus Windwalkers, when I see their 2-minute cooldowns, I just want to press Sacrifice 100%. And the reason I want to do that is because, and also I guess like maybe Shamans with Ascendants, that shit's kind of scary as hell. Like Doomwind's Ascendants, you probably want to just press Sacrifice too. Damage is too spiky and too high to heal through consistently, so I would recommend just literally pressing Sacrifice in that situation. Versus other things, you could kind of maybe save it for like when they're getting low if you want to avoid CC. But Windwalkers, Rets, and Enhancement Shaman, when I see their cooldowns, I just press Sacrifice and I press Wings. Sacrifice and Wings, because you want to line them up for the most part. Ascendance doesn't really line up, but Windwalker Monk cooldowns are 2 minutes, and Red Paladin cooldowns are 2 minutes. Also, when I see Combust, I do press Wings and I do press Sack. You're actually 100% right. If I can, I press both of those. If I can. If I'm playing with like a Shadow Priest or something and they disperse or something on Combust, I'll let them do that. But like if it's a warrior that's getting attacked or like a monk that's getting attacked, it's just probably going to be Trinket Sack. Boomy Incarn, 100% Sack Wings every single time. For the reason that the damage is too spiky. And in all those situations, actually versus Ret and Windwalker, I don't actually use Ultimate Sack anymore, I don't think. Versus Boomkin I do, and versus Fire Mage I do. Versus other classes that don't have as crazy burst, warriors, rogues, mages that aren't combusting, I actually try and use Kyrian first. And I think it's really important that you spread out your cooldowns as Holy Paladin. So obviously, 2 minutes versus 2 minutes, feel 100% free to use Avenging Wrath versus like other 2 minute cooldowns, like I mentioned. But I really like to try and use Kyrian first to try and prevent wings in some situations versus those classes that don't really add up. Like I don't want to press wings during like Avatar Bladestorm. I don't necessarily feel like it's worth it, especially since it's a shorter cooldown. So I try and like use Kyrian for that. I try really, really hard to never use Kyrian during Avenging Wrath. Sometimes you have to, but I would recommend trying to keep them separate. That way you get like, a little bit of healing outside of your wings. Like sometimes I try and Kyrian first and then wings. If you're fighting any of the classes that I said you gotta wings immediately, those classes normally pop immediately. So I try and use wings first and then Kyrian. I try and use my arm mastery, which is, for 50% damage reduction, kind of like in between when I feel like we're kind of taking overwhelming damage. I try never to use anything else with wings up, basically. I feel like wings kind of has to be enough in order for you to rotate properly. I try and use arm mastery like versus rogues and smoke bombs, in shadowy duels. I try and use it when I'm going to get CC'd. If you're fighting against like a hunter and you see this hunter pushing in, go and pop arm master here and you get 15% damage reduction during, the duration of that trap. It's normally a pretty good way to use it. But yeah, generally speaking, I try and use arm mastery outside of wings. And I guess the theme of what I'm saying is try and use as little as possible when you use wings, because I feel like when you pop wings, that has to be enough for the most part, besides when I said you wings and sack, to kind of get you through to the next wings. And that's when you're going to be using your Kyrian, that's when you're going to be using your Divine, that's when you're going to be using your Bop, and then you're going to try and, survive until your next wing, and then constantly cycle that. In terms of communication, depending on what classes you play with, you need to make sure that you are using their cooldowns in combination with your cooldowns, or you're going to run out very, very quickly. I'm going to briefly go over add-ons here real quick just because this is relevant. I use Arena Team Tracker to track the cooldown of my partners. And for example, when I play Shadow Priest Warrior, you see I could see all my Warriors cooldowns, but I could also see all my Priest cooldowns. And when I'm out of cooldowns or when I want to, I call for Fade on my Priest. I know when he has it. I call for Disperse on my Priest. I call for Rallying Cry on my Warrior. I call for Intervene on my Warrior. And I try and cycle those through where it's like, okay, we're fighting against Windwalker DK. I'm going to Trinket Sack this Oper, and I'm going to use Wings. Okay, you're still in trouble here. It's probably going to be Dispersed. After that, it's like, okay, I'm really struggling right now. Mez, I need you to intervene. Okay, you're still getting destroyed. You're going to need to Fade. All right, I'm going to use Divine Toll here. Top everyone. Wings is coming up really soon. We're kind of out of CDs right now. I'm going to throw out a Bop. All right, now Intervene's back up. Now Fade's back up. Now Rallying Cry's back up. Now we have Wings again. Like, you got to make sure you're communicating that entire time with your team, and you got to make sure you're rotating through those cooldowns. So understand that the more you use on Paladin, and keep in mind, sometimes you have to. Sometimes I use wings, and I literally got to use Divine Toll, and then sometimes I'm low, and I get caught in a stun, and I got to use a Bop, and then after that, I immediately have to use my damage reduction cooldown, my arm mastery. It happens, okay? It happens. If you ever have a huge overlap on cooldowns, the best thing I could say is try and evaluate the game to try and figure out why that went poorly. And as I talked about earlier in my video, if you're playing Awakening, which is supposed to help you kind of like in the middle game without the wings, and you're dying with wings up, you might need to try Sanctified Wrath. So I said it once and I'll say it again. I am personally not the best Paladin in the game. All right, I'm trying to tell you guys that I do struggle with rotating my cooldowns, and I'm still trying to figure out the best way to rotate my cooldowns. Feel free to watch some of those other really good Paladins that stream, because they might be able to give you better advice than me. They might be able to, teach you some things that I don't even know. But yeah, I will say compared to Venthyr, I think that Divine Toll is actually really good. It's actually a really strong cooldown, and it's only going to get stronger when you have the second Potency Conduit and when you can use Ring and Clarity. Because right now I think Focus Light's too good to drop, but Ring and Clarity is going to make it really, really good. Mana management on Holy Paladin, there's not really too much to talk about. We kind of already talked about it quite a bit. Basically, Flash of Light, incredibly inefficient. Whenever you're Flash of Lighting, you are, a tear is going to roll down your cheek every time you Flash a Light. For 2200 mana to heal for 3k, it's like, it's the equivalent to Soda Poppin spending 30 grand on cards to ruin them, because there's no winner there, alright? It's just, it feels bad, man. If you get those Holy Lights off, feels good, man. Flash of Lights, feels bad, man. In terms of actual mana efficiency, you don't really have much anymore. There's not really too much to talk about in terms of that. The next thing I have on this list that we're going to talk about is positioning, when to try and go offensive and defensive. Now, this is something that I don't want to say I struggle with on Paladin, but whenever I play new healers, I'm always tunnel visioning, going for crowd control. I'm always tunnel visioning it. Like, I always want to be the person that's making the plays. It takes a lot of, I don't want to say restraint, but self-control, I guess, to understand when the best time to go for crowd control is. And I would say that one thing that I've learned the hard way, discipline, I like that one. Yeah, it takes a lot of discipline. One thing that I've learned the hard way whenever I play my healers when I'm going for crowd control is make sure you have a backup plan. Unless you're in a desperate situation and you're all in and you know if you get this crowd control you're going to win, and if you don't get the crowd control you're probably going to lose, that's fine. But understand that, like, for example, if you have no wings and you have no bubble and you have no trinket and you use that last charge of steed because you want to go in there for the Hodge, and then the warrior charges you, and then you're like, oh, fuck, I'm just kind of here now. I might die. Like, understand you're probably going to die. So, whenever you're going for crowd control, just try and think to yourself, what if I don't get it? Can I survive? You know what I mean? On Druid, I kind of like, I blink in all the time. I have no Barkskin, I have no Trinket. Well, I'm an asshole, you know? On Paladin, I steed in. I have no bubble. I have no trinket. You know, I have no wings. I can't really do anything. Well, I'm an asshole. So I will say that. Obviously, at the start of the game, it's easier to go for crowd control because you're most likely kind of chaining your crowd control off things that are already there, and then you already you have all your cooldowns, so you're kind of prepared for that situation at the start of the game, regardless. At the start of the game, it's much easier, but you know, it's kind of like those mid games, the mid game, late game, where it's like, you know, do I have those cooldowns to push in for this crowd control? Is this a good idea right now? And you got to ask yourself a question. You got to ask yourself that question. Do you have wings? Do you have bubble? Do you have trinket? Is this a good idea? Is this going to get us a kill? Also, another time to push in for crowd control is, like, are you on the offensive? So if I'm playing Windwalker DK or if I'm playing Rogue Mage, is their team locked down so I could push in for this crowd control for free? Or are you the one that's trying to set up the crowd control? If you're the one that's trying to set up the crowd control, it becomes a little bit more difficult, so keep that in mind as well. But yeah, generally offensive to defensive, you kind of always want to judge on cooldown. When you're able to hammer Wrath, you want to hammer Wrath on cooldown. If you're at full HP and you got Shock Bearers out already, you could throw out the Holy Shock offensively. I don't really think Crusader Strike does much damage, but you know, if you want to get fancy and you want to generate a little bit of holy power, sure, toss out the Crusader Strike. Don't give up your position for it. But yeah, just make sure that you have a backup plan for when you're going offensive, and make sure that, you know, if you're the one initiating it, like, you understand that. Now, in terms of common mistakes, I don't know if I really know common mistakes as a Holy Paladin. I would say one thing that a lot of lower rated Paladins probably don't do is use Crusader Strike for generating holy power. That's obviously going to be really big. I would definitely recommend it. You know, people are in melee range. If there's a pet on you, if you're getting attacked and you're kind of struggling to heal, use Crusader Strike, get the holy power, use instant healing. You want to try and avoid casting on Holy Paladin as much as possible outside of Divine Favor. Like, I don't really think Crusader Strike it's less or more inefficient. I don't think it's more inefficient than non-infused Flash of Lights. So if you're getting trained, you're obviously not going to do this. But if you're getting trained, this is also really hard to do. But even if you do it, you know, you're spending twice the mana for 3k healing, which is obviously good. But you have the opportunity to get knocked out or locked out, right? Surviving's number one. But yeah, if you're running low on mana and it's your teammates that are dying and you're just trying to generate free holy power, you should be a little bit careful of the mana cost. That is a good point. Another mistake that I could see other people doing is not using Hammer Wrath very often when you wings. The only reason I see this could be a common mistake of other Paladins is that I wasn't used to Hammer Wrath when I first got it, and maybe I still make the mistake every once in a while where you pop wings, make sure you send the Hammer Wrath. It's 0 mana, free 1 holy power, free damage. Make the enemy team spend more mana, and you're generating mana. It's really good. Definitely want to do that. Some other things I could see Paladins having some trouble with is swapping beacons. Make sure that you basically have beacons on your main targets that are taking the damage all the time for most efficiency in terms of healing. But keep in mind that, you know, okay, I play Shadow Priest Warrior. Even if my Warrior is taking a little bit of damage and I can get value out of that beacon, if I'm fighting like a Rogue Mage or a Ret Hunter or something that can swap to me and destroy me, I've been destroyed by Rogue Mage, I've been destroyed by Windwalker Decay, I've been destroyed by Fire Mages and Boomkins and, you know, stuff like that. Sometimes I like to keep Beacon on myself for that little extra safety net of having the Saved by the Light. So just keep in mind, though, even though you might be able to get a little bit more efficiency out of healing those 2 targets with Beacon. Keep in mind that sometimes you're vulnerable, and sometimes you want that Beacon of Faith up just to have that hard swap for Saved by the Light, okay? So just, just keep that in mind. Recognize, be like, wow, I have no trinket, no bubble. Beacon's going on me. I have no trinket, I have no bubble. Everyone, stay the fuck away from me. I don't want none of this. Let me finish going over my add-on. Sorry, I'm kind of not really going by the template here. I apologize. So I'll finish going over my add-ons. It was just relevant for that one thing I was talking about. I use big debuffs to show CC and interrupts over my frame, stuff like this. This is what big debuffs is for me only. It shows when they're crowd control, it shows when they use an offensive or defensive, and it also shows if they're interrupted. It's pretty handy. Details is my, what's it called? Obviously my damage meter. Fly plate buffs is the thing on the enemy nameplates that show their cooldowns, offensive or defensive or crowd control. Super easy to adjust specific spells. You can add all this stuff here. I like it a lot. Omnibar is the one in the middle of my screen that shows all the cooldowns. S Arena, DR tracker, cast bars, all sizable, really nice. Tell me when it's irrelevant. And Trophy GCD is for you guys, see the extra global, stuff like that. So those are the add-ons that I use. I would recommend using Arena Team Tracker 100%. I would recommend using an Omnibar of some sort 100%. Those ones are really important. Those ones are absolutely important. You got to understand as a healer what cooldowns your teammates have and what cooldowns your enemies have, and I think those two do that job very well. So definitely recommend using it. Finally, we're going to talk about compositions here, and this is a tricky one for me to talk about right now because we're like 3 weeks into the season. There's so many compositions that work. I said it with Paladin, or I said it with the Shamans that they're versatile healers, and Paladins are the same thing. I personally think that Paladins might be the best healer right now, which means you can play with 2 casters. You have great synergy with caster. You have freaking concentration R, give them R mastery. You have one of the most powerful stuns in the game, 6 seconds long, or you can play extra CC. You have really powerful healing, so you can play with the double casters, help them get kills, help them keep them alive. You can play with the double melee, which is the same thing. You can play that CC, you can throw out that extra damage. Paladins have pretty strong damage. You can keep them really offensive, bop, sack, things like that. Your healing is really, really good. And then you can also play melee caster. So Paladins are super versatile right now. I've been playing a little bit of Shadow Priest Warrior. I'm not super high rated as it, but to be fair, I think we're a little under geared, and we're also learning. We're literally 3 alts. It's me, Mez, and Sam. Sam literally got 190 item level the other day. 190. 190 is terrible. Mez has a 184 weapon as a warrior, Keck W. So, what I mean? We're a little undergeared. And I think the comp's okay. I think Warrior Boomkin could be good. I think Windwalker Boomkin could be good. I think Rhett Shadow Priest or Rhett Boomkin. So basically, I wrote this out before. And I'm going to write it out again. These are the insane melee, in my opinion, right now. War, Windwalker, Rhett. And these are the good casters right now. Fire Mage, Boomkin, Ellie. If you take a combination of these, you're probably going to be pretty strong. You can play Ellie War, you can play Windwalker Ellie, you can play Windwalker Boomkin, you can play Shadow Priest Mage, you can play S Priest Boomkin, you can play Fire Mage Boomkin. I feel like all these comps are actually going to be fairly decent. Believe it or not, I actually don't think rogues are too insane outside of with a mage. Okay? Are rogues unplayable? No. Rogue mage is still really insane, but unless obviously you can play R and Paula, but I don't think I don't think rogues are S tier by themselves. You know what I mean? Oh, you could also play Windwalker DK. I don't think DKs are S tier at all, but I think with a Windwalker they're insane. You can actually even play Warrior, more DK. Turbo could be good. And it's possible Hunter Pharaoh could be good as well. But that is going to, that's going to kind of finish up what I wanted to talk about here. Basically, my opinion, Paladins are actually one of the strongest healers right now. I was actually incredibly surprised with how powerful their instant healing is and how powerful their cooldowns are. So that's going to be it, man. I hope you guys learned something from this, and I appreciate you guys watching, man. Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys. Peace. That you never be lonely. Be the fan that's